Erin Davis went missing from her home in Nicholson, Mississippi on June 22, 2002. Before her disappearance, her sister-in-law had dropped Erin off at her home. However, she returned the next day. Erin was nowhere to be found. All that her sister-in-law found was Erin's 2 small children, aged 2 and 4, and Erin's purse. At the time of her disappearance, she was also said to be 7 months pregnant. No traces of Erin were ever found when investigators started searching for her in 2002. In 2019, the Harrison County Sheriff's Department would receive some additional information prompting them to obtain a cadaver dog to search an area near West Hobochita Creek on Henleyfield McNeil Road. The cadaver dog would alert to the presence of remains in 2 different locations, 75 feet apart. They would then request the assistance of Southern Mississippi's Anthropology Department. With the help of 8 graduate students, they would use rakes and shovels to remove small amounts of dirt and also test for variances in the soil. However, they were not optimistic because this area is very well known for flooding 5 to 6 times per year. By the end of the additional investigation, no remains were found. The case still remains a mystery to this day. 17-year-old Angela Freeman was last seen around 1 a.m. at a local Pizza Hut in Petal, Mississippi on September 10, 1993. The next day, her car was found abandoned at the old Mounted Bridge in Perry County, Mississippi. Angela's keys and purse were missing. It is rumored that Angela was 4 to 5 months pregnant at the time. In addition, her on-again, off-again boyfriend was reported to be acting very strangely on the morning of her disappearance. The first crucial hours after her disappearance were wasted by the rural sheriff department that was untrained in proper investigation and were sure that Angela was just a runaway. One example of an adequate investigation is the fact that investigators actually had Angela's mother drive the car to her home instead of the car being sent for further investigation. In addition, the sheriff at the time refused to use cadaver dogs or drag the river. A puddle of fluid seen near the car was brushed off by police as being transmission fluid from a log truck. It wasn't until 4 days later that cadaver dogs were brought in and the area near her car and the nearby water was searched. The cadaver dogs went straight to the spot of fluid found near the car, which was later determined to be her blood. That same day, the dogs found a napkin with traces of Angela's DNA in makeup smeared as if she had been crying and wiped her face. The napkin was found in the woods nearby. The dogs also found both her shoes nearby. It was later discovered that the car actually contained drops of Angela's blood inside and outside. The police had not dusted the car for fingerprints or looked for blood before having her mother take the car away. Angela's friends reported that on several occasions, Angela and her friends had hung out under the Mounted Bridge, and it was said that Angela was always creeped out by the area and ready to leave before anyone else. This case, nearly 30 years later, has continued to be unsolved, and Angela's body has never been found. On February 4, 1986, 17-year-old high school student Shondra May's disappearance shook the small community of Pea Ridge, Mississippi. Shondra attended Leake Academy and was just a few months short of graduating. She worked part-time at a local McDonald's. On the evening of her disappearance, work was slow. It was cold, rainy, and damp, causing people to stay home and not venture out. As a result, by 7:24 p.m., Shondra had clocked out due to the slow customer traffic. Eager to get in the hours, she stayed around the restaurant hoping that business would pick up and she could clock back in. At 7:40 p.m., she gave up and decided to leave. Before leaving, she used the restaurant phone and called her mother to let her know she was on her way home. Shondra's mother became worried when enough time had passed for her to make the trip home from Forest. Soon after, she opened the door of her home and was faced with a disheartening sight. Her daughter's car was parked on the road less than 100 yards from the house. A check of the car revealed no signs of Shondra. Her purse and belongings remained inside, but her driver's license was missing. Relatives moved the car from the spot to the house, contaminating foot traffic. Found inside the car was a receipt for a Valentine's card that was purchased from a local TG&Y store. Witnesses also reported seeing her purchasing the oversized Valentine's card that evening. It is speculated that the card was bought for her boyfriend at the time, a 19-year-old from Edinburgh, Mississippi. Local law enforcement was involved in the search, and eventually state and FBI investigators were brought in. One big issue with the investigation is the site where the car was parked was never treated as a crime scene, and therefore lots of evidence was most likely missed. 3 weeks later, on the morning of February 26, near the town of Bolton, Mississippi, an off-duty fireman came across something floating in the waters of Baker Creek. Authorities removed black plastic garbage bags. Inside were the battered remains of Shondra, 80 miles from her home and in an area where the remains of others had also been found over the years. The medical examiner found that she had been bound and gagged with packing tape and hit in the head with a heavy object. The cause of death was strangulation. The examiner estimated that Shondra had lived for as much as 17 to 19 days and that her body had possibly only been in the water for 3 to 5 days after her death. There was also some speculation that her body may have been refrigerated for some period of time, which would mean that the time she was alive may have been even shorter than originally projected. Many leads on her death followed, and each only led to a dead end. After all these years, the identity of Shondra's vicious killer remains a mystery. On August 21, 1989, 17-year-old Norman Ladner left his family's country store to go hunting on their 122-acre farm. Norman was an experienced outdoorsman and often spent his spare time exploring his family's land. Norman always returned to the family store between 7 and 7:30 p.m. without fail. When he didn't return later this particular night, his parents began searching their property along with a few friends. Everyone thought he had gotten lost or maybe injured. No one expected what they would find in those woods on that fateful night. Norman's father stumbled upon his son's body laying beneath a tree with a gunshot wound in his temple. Initially, authorities speculated the death was a horrible accident. Perhaps the teenager had jumped down from the tree and fell, making his rifle go off. The family was then shocked when the coroner labeled his death a suicide. Nothing about it made sense. If it were a suicide, why was there a large gash on the top of his head? The sheriff refused to discuss any scenarios besides suicide with the boy's parents. The police never processed the scene as a crime scene. They didn't find a bullet. They didn't look for a bullet. The father would later find one on his own. Norman's gun was never tested or fingerprinted. The teen's wallet, with $140 cash, was missing. The parents repeatedly tried to get the sheriff to reopen the case, but he flat out refused. His father, desperate for answers, went out into the woods to begin his own investigation. There in the dirt, under where his son's head would have been, he found a bullet with human blood and hair. It seemed to the father that his son was slumped on the ground, rolled to the side, and someone standing above him shot the teen through the temple. The bullet then traveled through the hair and skull and buried into the dirt. Still desperate for answers, the boy's father took the bullet to the sheriff and was quickly dismissed. The police claimed since they didn't find the bullet, then they couldn't prove it was the one that killed Norman. Norman Sr. took the bullet to the state's ballistic lab. He explained how the bullet was too long to fit into his son's gun and asked the examiner to look over the bullet. The results came back inconclusive, citing the same lines as the sheriff, almost verbatim. To make matters worse, when the bullet was returned to the family, it was a different bullet than the bullet they had sent in. One day, Norman's mother was approached by a stranger asking if he could discuss her son's case with her. When the pair were out of earshot of her husband, the stranger turned and uttered a chilling threat to her. He told her she should just drop the investigation because they would never find Norman's killer. Frightened, she hurried back to her husband and told him about the incident. The man was gone before anyone could find him. One day, the teen's father was once again looking for clues in the woods. 300 yards from where his son was found, he saw a strange object hanging in a tree. It was a homemade radio device of sorts, covered in tape and wires, with a small antenna protruding from the top. It was then taken to a retired DEA agent who knew immediately that this was a device used by drug traffickers to transmit signals. The narcotics planes would fly over an area, and when the signal was picked up on their devices, they would drop their load of drugs. Was this the answer the family had been looking for? Did the teen stumble upon a drug trafficker? To make matters worse, a sheriff would later be charged with dogfighting and other illegal activities. Although some believe he had ties to the local group of Dixie Mafia drug cartel, nothing has been proven. Mary Jacqueline Levitz was last seen on November 18, 1995, by a neighbor as she entered her Vicksburg, Mississippi home shortly after 4 p.m. on November 18. She was seen earlier the same day by a store clerk at a business in Vicksburg, Mississippi, where she was buying wallpaper for her new home. 2 days later, on November 20th, her disappearance was discovered when a relative went to her home to find out why she hadn't been answering the phone. Jacqueline's front door was found open. Her bedroom carpet and king-size mattress were soaked in blood. Someone had turned the mattress over to conceal the stains. Signs of a fierce struggle, including torn-off fingernails, were scattered on the floor. Although the local sheriff says 2 purses and a tote bag were taken from the house, the perpetrators left behind 2 fur coats valued at $200,000 and a $3,000 pair of earrings, and her cream-colored Jaguar was parked in the driveway. Jacqueline's last marriage was to Ralph Levitz, co-founder of the Levitz Furniture Empire. Ralph died in March 1995, and Jacqueline inherited his estate worth an estimated $15 million. She had resided in Palm Beach, Florida, but moved to Vicksburg just a few weeks before she disappeared to be nearer to her family. Jacqueline's house in Vicksburg was undergoing extensive remodeling in November 1995, but she was still living in it. There was almost no furniture in the house, only her mattress, some plastic lawn chairs, and a refrigerator. One theory is that whoever abducted Levitz was already in the house when she returned home from a building supply store that Saturday afternoon with wallpaper samples. Because work was being done on the attic, an intruder would not even need to break in. Jacqueline's loved ones and the police believe she met with foul play. Her lawyer speculates that she was the victim of a botched kidnapping, probably at the hands of someone from outside the Vicksburg area. Police believe her body may have been disposed of in the Mississippi River, which runs near Jacqueline's home. She was declared dead in 2000, but her presumed murder or murderers remain uncaught.